Good evening and thanks for joining us. Gubernatorial candidate Jim Gibbons is on the defensive tonight, firing back at a former housekeeper who alleges she was an illegal immigrant when she worked for the congressman.
The Gibbons camp claims the woman is an extortionist who previously tried to blackmail the family, but the woman says she was exploited by the family. George Knapp of the I-Team is here with his exclusive story.
Paul and Dave, Patricia Pastor Sandoval says she worked for Jim Gibbons and his wife Dawn for several years in the late 80s and early 90s, and that her employers were fully aware of her undocumented status. Her story surfaced once before when she was accused of trying to extort money from Dawn Gibbons. The charge against Sandoval went nowhere, but now could play a role in this year's governor's race.
He said he never had no illegals, and it's not true. It's his lie.
Patricia Sandoval says that when Jim Gibbons talks about getting tough with illegal immigrants, he's overlooking a chapter from his own past. She says she was hired by the Gibbons family beginning in July 1987 to clean their beautiful home outside of Reno and to care for their infant son, Jimmy. She stayed with the family off and on until 1993, she says. On occasion, she says she worked on Gibbons' election campaign and sometimes had to hide downstairs so she wouldn't be discovered by visitors.
Jim Gibbons didn't know about your illegal status?
Yes.
Did he also know that you were asked to hide and not answer the door?
Well, I think, yes, he knows, because she married with Don. They know everything.
A statement issued late Tuesday afternoon by Dawn Gibbons states that Gibbons never considered Sandoval to be an employee, that Sandoval performed occasional odd jobs only, and that Gibbons felt sorry for Sandoval. Dawn Gibbons made a similar statement in 1995 to a Reno newspaper. Gibbons' statement adds the family did not know what Sandoval's legal status was until later. A Gibbons friend told us that Sandoval was compensated with food, clothing, and household items for the work she did, but not a formal salary. But in 1988, Dawn Gibbons tried to help Sandoval obtain legal status so she could work. She filed papers with federal immigration officials. In those papers, it stated that Sandoval was, in fact, an undocumented alien, that she'd worked for the Gibbons family since 1987, that she put in a full 40 to 48 hours per week. An employment agreement said she was to be paid $800 a month. Dawn Gibbons signed those papers.
You can't correct the fact that you hired somebody illegally by thereafter getting them papers. During that period of time, during those years from 1987 to the time that she was released from her employment, for approximately 4 years, possibly 5, she was illegally working. There's no way that you are able to correct that. Can't go back and correct that. Say, well, now I'm legal.
But there's another dark angle to this story. In 1995, Dawn Gibbons filed a police complaint against Sandoval, alleging that Sandoval was trying to extort money from her. Sandoval says she had an English-speaking neighbor write this letter to ask for Gibbons' help in completing her immigration paperwork. Gibbons says she received phone messages demanding money and threatening to take the story to the media and hurt Jim Gibbons' campaign. Someone placed an odd ad and photo in the newspaper, perhaps as a warning of what might still be to come. Eventually, the Gibbons family decided against moving forward with any charges, and none were filed. Years later, Sandoval wrote letters to the family asking for forgiveness for the, quote, bad things she'd done. She denies ever asking for money.
You didn't ask for any money?
No.
Late this afternoon, the Jim Gibbons campaign issued its own statement in anticipation of our story. The scathing letter blames this controversy on Democratic gubernatorial candidate Dina Titus, accuses her of trying to focus the campaign on matters other than the issues and of maliciously attacking personal reputations. The statement did not address whether the story told by Patricia is true or not.
All right.
A lot more to come, I suspect, especially from our colleague John Ralston.
Yeah, what does all this mean for Gibbons' campaign?
Political analyst John Ralston here to talk more about it. Pretty damaging story, you think?
Well, you know, listen, with everything that's out there, Jim Gibbons hasn't had much news since Friday the 13th of October, and this just adds to it. It's hard to tell, since George just broke the story, what the impact is. But he mentioned a couple of things that are very important here. They are not denying the veracity of the basic story that they knew this woman, that she worked in their home. It all depends on what the definition of the word employee ploy is they gave her an occasional allowance and food. That's going to sound like, to a lot of people, like she was employed. Did they know she was illegal? Is it credible that they would have let a woman like this close to their son, their infant son, without knowing everything they needed to know about her? And the problem for Jim Gibbons is he has made such a big deal about immigration in this campaign that the issue of hypocrisy, which hurts candidates more than any other, David and Paula, is going to be out there.
Yeah.
What's the campaign's reaction?
Well, George mentioned those statements that were put out, and they are really fascinating. I mean, Dawn Gibbons tried to make it sound like she has a big heart, tried to help this woman. Again, said she didn't consider her an employee, but there are plenty of pictures, as George showed. The woman clearly considered herself almost a part of the family. That's how close she was. So they were being nice and kind to this woman, and yet she was an illegal immigrant. Now, what the campaign did is all they could do, which is change the subject, or try to change the subject, to Dina Titus. It's all her fault. These are political charges. The problem is, as George rightly pointed out, they never address the veracity of the basic facts of this story.
Are there any more shoes to drop here, you think?
Well, this Chrissy Mazzeo story, the woman who accused Jim Gibbons of the assault on Friday the 13th. I mean, Friday the 13th is going to end by Halloween for Jim Gibbons. She's calling a press conference tomorrow with her lawyer, Rick Wright. That's going to continue that story for a while. There's talk that a national newspaper is working on a story about Jim Gibbons. This is amazing, Paul and Dave, because just a week and a half ago on October 12th, October 13th, it looked like Jim Gibbons had this race well in hand, and now suddenly he is hemorrhaging as no candidate I've ever seen is hemorrhaging in the last week or two of a campaign.
All right, John, thank you.